Have you ever looked at those people who are at the top of their game? Those individuals whose lives make you feel a twinge of envy? The ones whose success makes you think, if only I had that much talent. Were they really more gifted than you, or did they possess something else entirely? Something invisible, yet hiding behind every major victory. In a groundbreaking study, psychologist Angela Duckworth researched thousands of cadets at West Point Military Academy. These cadets were physically fit, mentally sharp, and had top-tier IQs. Yet within the first week of training, hundreds dropped out. And those who stayed weren't the most talented, they were the most passionate and persistent. That was the only difference. And that single difference can change an entire life. This is the power of grit. What is grit? Defining the psychological force. Grit isn't just a word. It's a psychological force that transforms ordinary people into extraordinary ones. Angela Duckworth, herself a psychologist and a MacArthur Genius Grant winner, proved through years of research that talent is a myth. The people who endure, who fall and get back up, who practice with passion, they are the ones who win. In this video, you'll discover how an ordinary person can develop grit from within. You'll learn how to identify your passion, how deliberate practice can take you miles ahead of others, how purpose keeps you alive on days when everything seems to be falling apart, and how your environment silently shapes your inner strength. This isn't just a book summary. It's a new way of looking at your life. So make sure you watch until the very end, because every next moment will elevate your thinking to a new level. And if you want more life-changing book summaries, powerful mindset videos, and deep psychological lessons that can transform your life, then like this video right now. Comment below with "I have grit" and make sure to subscribe to Wise Pages, because the next few minutes could change your thinking forever. Secret 1: How passion determines long-term success. It was 1994. Mozart was considered the world's greatest musical genius. People said his gift came from God, that he was born talented, that no one could ever be like him. But when researcher Michael Howe deeply studied Mozart's childhood, the truth that emerged was earth-shattering. Mozart had spent the first 18 years of his life purely in practice. His father was a strict music teacher who made him practice for hours from childhood. It wasn't talent, it was obsession. It was passion. And this is the truth the world hides from you. We worship talent, but we fail to understand the silent power of passion. The world doesn't applaud you at the beginning. In the beginning, the world only judges. When you keep chasing a dream even after falling repeatedly, people think you're foolish. But history bears witness, extraordinary people aren't born. They're forged through repeated trials. Angela Duckworth noticed one thing repeatedly in her research: the people who reach the top aren't necessarily the most talented. They're the most passionate. Passion isn't an emotion that suddenly awakens one day. It's a direction, a commitment. It's an internal fire that isn't ignited from outside but develops slowly from within. And this is where the journey begins, the journey that transforms the ordinary into the extraordinary. Think about a person who wakes up every morning and knows exactly what they need to do, why they need to do it, and what they're living for. They don't need motivational speeches. They don't need external pushes. They are a force in themselves. That's the true form of passion. And science says this force isn't in anyone's DNA, it's built. Here's a fact that will shock you: a Harvard University study found that students who had genuine interest in their work were 3 times more productive than those who worked only for external rewards. 3 times. Simply because they loved their work. Passion boosts performance to a level that no shortcut can achieve. But here's a dangerous trap that most people fall into. They think passion will suddenly appear one day, that one morning they'll wake up and discover their calling. This is the biggest lie. Angela Duckworth clearly states, passion isn't discovered, it's developed. It grows from the things you try, the things you fail at, the things you still don't give up on. And now the question is passion enough? Does simply loving something make you great at it? No. Because passion without practice is incomplete. But practice without passion is just a dream. And the people who truly reach the top practice in a specific way that 99% of people don't even know about. That practice that makes you slightly better every day, that's uncomfortable, that hurts, but that takes you where talent can never reach. Secret 2, why deliberate practice beats natural talent. An experiment took place at the Academy of Music in Berlin. Researchers divided violin students into 3 groups. The first group consisted of students on the path to becoming world-class soloists. The second group included those who were simply good. The third group consisted of those who would never become professionals. The researchers asked a simple question: what was the difference between these 3 groups? It wasn't IQ. It wasn't family background. It definitely wasn't natural talent. The difference was in only one thing: hours of practice. The students at the top had practiced an average of 10,000 hours in their lifetime, while those behind had practiced less than 4,000 hours. This wasn't just a coincidence. It was a universal truth. But wait, here's the twist. It's not just practice, it's deliberate practice. These 2 words change everything. You go to the gym every day, but are you actually growing? You work every day, but are you actually getting better? Most people's answer would be no. Because they're practicing, but not deliberately. And this is the line drawn between average and extraordinary. Psychologist Anders Ericsson, whose research forms the foundation of Angela Duckworth's theory, discovered that deliberate practice means working on that specific weakness that makes you uncomfortable. That area where you fail repeatedly. That moment when your mind says, "That's enough for today." Right at that moment, deliberate practice begins when you want to stop, yet you still take one more step forward. Research shows that an average person spends 80% of their daily practice on things they already know well. They stay in their comfort zone. They do what feels easy. And that's why, even years later, they stand in the same place where they started. Growth doesn't happen where everything is easy. Growth happens at the edge where you're stretched, where you feel discomfort, where failure isn't just a possibility but a certainty. Consider Serena Williams, one of the most dominant tennis players in the world. Her coach said that during practice, Serena would specifically repeat the shots that were her weaknesses. She would deliberately create the situations that gave her trouble in matches. And she wouldn't stop until that weakness transformed into strength. That was her secret. Not talent-targeted, painful, deliberate practice. And here's the most important point: deliberate practice isn't just physical, it's mental. It requires focus. It requires a clear goal. It requires immediate feedback. You need to know after every practice session where you were, where you are now, and what you need to do differently next time. Without feedback, practice is just repetition, and repetition doesn't create greatness. Reflection does. Benjamin Franklin, remembered by the world as a genius, wrote in his autobiography that he would read his writing, close it, rewrite it, and compare it to the original again and again until it became better. This was the purest form of deliberate practice. A founding father who challenged himself daily, judged himself daily, and grew a little more every single day. Now here's a question for you: does your daily practice contain any discomfort? Is there any moment when you ask yourself, why is this difficult? If not, you're not practicing, you're just passing time. And people who pass time don't make history. But here's another truth you might have missed. You have passion. You have deliberate practice. Yet some people still give up everything one day despite having both. Because they lack that one thing that keeps a person alive even on their darkest days. That thing that becomes your anchor in every storm. That thing without which passion fades and practice seems meaningless. And what is that thing? Stay tuned to find out. Secret 3, How a strong sense of purpose fuels motivation. It was 1944. World War II was at its most brutal stage. Millions of people were in Nazi concentration camps, facing death every single day. There was hunger, pain, and darkness. In those same camps was a psychiatrist named Viktor Frankl. He noticed that the people who broke first weren't physically weak, they were people who had no reason to live. And those who survived that hell had one thing: a purpose, a reason, a why. Viktor Frankl later wrote, "He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how." This isn't just a quote. It's one of the deepest truths of human psychology. You've learned about passion. You've learned about deliberate practice. But there's a question that remains unanswered. When everything is going wrong, when results aren't coming, when people are laughing at you, when loneliness feels so heavy that breathing becomes difficult, what pushes you forward? Where is passion at that moment? Where is practice? Only one thing exists there: purpose. And those who don't have it will eventually stop. Angela Duckworth observed a common pattern among thousands of high achievers in her research. Whether they were athletes, artists, scientists, or entrepreneurs, all of them had a moment in their lives when they felt everything was over. But what pulled them out of that moment wasn't their talent. It wasn't their practice. It was a deep sense of purpose. A belief that what they were doing wasn't just for themselves, it was for someone else, for a larger cause. Here's a fact science has proven. A Yale University study found that people with a clear sense of purpose had a life expectancy 7 years longer than those without purpose. 7 years. Purpose doesn't just increase your success, it literally extends your life. It reduces your cortisol levels, strengthens your immune system, and gives your brain a direction that makes it see every obstacle as a challenge rather than a threat. But it's important to understand the difference between purpose and passion. Passion is what excites you. Purpose is what makes you meaningful. Passion starts with "I like this." Purpose starts with "this can change someone else's life." And Angela Duckworth says that truly gritty people are those whose passion eventually transforms into purpose. When your work is no longer just yours, when someone else's life becomes connected to it, then giving up becomes almost impossible. Consider Steve Jobs. The world knows him as a visionary. But in 1985, he was fired from the very company he had created, Apple. Anyone would have broken at that moment. But Jobs later said, "I realized I didn't love Apple. I loved the idea that Apple represented making technology so human that every ordinary person could use it." That was his purpose. And that purpose picked him back up, led him to create Next, led him to create Pixar, and eventually brought him back to Apple to make history. Purpose transformed a broken man into a legend. Now you might be wondering, what is my purpose? How will I find it? Angela Duckworth's answer is that purpose isn't found in a day, but there is a way to discover it. Ask yourself 3 questions. First, how does my work affect someone else's life? Second, if I don't do this, who will be harmed? Third, what do I want to be remembered for 10 years from now? Your purpose is hidden in the answers to these 3 questions. And the day you find it, the texture of your life will change. Daily struggle will feel different. Fatigue will mean something different. Failure will become a lesson instead of an ending. Because now you're not just fighting for yourself, you're fighting for a larger cause. Secret 4, the psychology of hope and resilience after failure. In 2009, an experiment took place. Researchers gave 2 groups of students an impossible math problem, one that actually couldn't be solved. The first group tried for a while and then gave up. They thought, "I'm not smart enough. I can't do this." But the second group was different. They kept trying repeatedly. They found new approaches. They got frustrated. But they never said to themselves, "I failed." They said, "I haven't found the right way yet." And this single psychological shift, this single sentence is the real difference between the world's most successful people and the most average ones. This is hope. But not the hope you're thinking of. Most people treat hope as a passive feeling. Hope that everything will be okay. Hope that a miracle will happen. Hope that luck will change. This isn't hope, it's escapism. The hope Angela Duckworth talks about is completely different. It's an active, aggressive, psychological force. It's a belief that my situation can change through my actions. It's a conviction that even though I failed now, I can learn from it, I can grow, and I can come back. Psychologist Martin Seligman called this the opposite of learned helplessness. In his research, he found that when people experience repeated failure and feel they have no control, they mentally shut down. They stop trying. Even when the situation actually changes and success becomes possible, they still don't try because their brain has made helplessness part of their identity. This isn't just a psychological theory, it's the reality of millions of people's lives. Here's a fact that will stop you in your tracks. Stanford University research shows that after failure, people who say this attempt failed instead of I failed perform 40% more effectively the next time. Just one word makes that difference. I versus this attempt. When you connect failure to your identity, you permanently label yourself. But when you see failure as an event, a temporary moment, your brain learns from it and moves forward. Remember Michael Jordan, considered the greatest player in basketball history. But did you know he was cut from his high school varsity basketball team? His coach said he wasn't talented enough. That day, Jordan went home, locked himself in his room, and cried. But he also did something else. He decided that this failure wouldn't be the end of his story. From the next day, he started practicing alone. Hours every day. That rejection became his greatest fuel. And the rest is history. This is the kind of hope Angela Duckworth talks about. The hope that gives direction even in darkness. The hope that says, not yet but one day, definitely. But how do you develop this hope? Because like passion and purpose, it isn't a gift, it's a skill built through practice. First, consciously change your self-talk. When you fail, your brain automatically creates a story: I'm weak, I can't do this, it's beyond my control. You need to catch that moment and rewrite the story: this is difficult, but I'm learning. This failure is telling me something. I'm in the process. This isn't just positive thinking, it's neurological rewiring. Every time you change your self-talk, your brain literally creates new neural pathways. Second, use your past as evidence. When everything feels dark, look back. Remember those moments when you thought something was impossible but you still came through. Every person has those moments in their life. Those moments are your most powerful weapons. They remind you that you've survived before, and you will again. Secret 5: How environment and culture shape your growth. In the 1990s, Finland's education system was at the very bottom of the world rankings. Results were poor. Students weren't motivated. Teachers were frustrated. But just 3 decades later, Finland's education system is number 1 in the world. They consistently rank at the top in PISA rankings. When Harvard researchers studied how such a dramatic change happened, the answer they found was shocking. They didn't bring in new technology. They didn't hire genius teachers. They changed only one thing: culture. They created an environment where effort was celebrated, failure was considered part of learning, and every child was made to believe they could grow. Just that, and the entire country changed. This is the final and most powerful secret that completes the entire theory of grit. You developed passion. You did deliberate practice. You found purpose. You used hope as a weapon. But if you're in an environment that's silently crushing all these things, how long will any of this last? This is an uncomfortable question. But it's also the most important one. Angela Duckworth says that culture and environment play just as much of a role in shaping grit as individual effort. We like to think we make our own choices, that we're masters of our own destiny, and this is partly true. But only partly. Because our surroundings influence our brains in ways we don't even realize. This influence is so subtle, so slow, that by the time we become aware of it, it's often too late. Research found that people who live with high-performing peers automatically raise their performance standards without any conscious effort. And the opposite is equally true. People who constantly hear negativity, mediocrity, and this isn't possible have their brains slowly accept that reality. This isn't weakness, it's human neuroscience. Our brains are wired to be social creatures. They continuously learn from their environment, whether we want them to or not. The Navy SEALs are considered the world's most elite military force. Their training, known as Hell Week, is so brutal that an average of 75% of candidates quit within the first week. When researchers studied what was common among those who completed it, one pattern appeared repeatedly. They weren't alone. They had formed an unspoken bond with each other. When one got tired, another pulled them forward. When one fell, the others picked them up. Their collective culture was more powerful than their individual grit. The shared belief that we can do this made the environment achieve what no individual effort could. Here's a fact that will keep you thinking tonight. A University of Chicago study found that your average income equals the average income of your 5 closest friends. And it's not just income, your ambition, your habits, your mindset, your grit, everything is deeply influenced by those 5 people you spend the most time with. This is a statistical reality. And it forces you to ask a very important question: who are your 5 people? Do they pull you up or pull you down? But environment isn't limited to people. It's the content you consume. It's the conversations you have daily. It's the words you say to yourself. It's the physical space where you work. All of these combine to create an invisible culture that either nurtures your inner grit or slowly erodes it. Angela Duckworth says that gritty people consciously design their environment. They choose with intention, not by accident, what will be around them, who will be there, and what energy will exist. There's a little-known story about Kobe Bryant. When he was new in the NBA, he noticed that some of his teammates would go home immediately after practice. Kobe would stay for hours alone. But after a while, he deliberately started spending more time with players who were even more dedicated than him, who were better than him. Because he knew that being around average people creates average habits. And Kobe Bryant didn't want to be average. So the question isn't whether you have grit. The question is your environment allowing your grit to survive? Are the people around you fueling your passion? Is your daily culture pushing you toward deliberate practice? Does your environment remind you of your purpose? When you fail, does your environment give you hope, or does it whisper, "Give up"? Passion, practice, purpose, hope, and environment, these 5 together form a force that no obstacle in the world can permanently stop. Angela Duckworth proved through years of research that talent is a lottery. But grit is a choice. And right now, at this very moment, you have everything you need. The only question is, will you choose it? Because the world is full of talented people who never made it anywhere. And history is made by those who fell, who broke, who were alone but who didn't stop. They were gritty. And now you know what grit is. The question is, what will you do with this knowledge?